What is the longest you have ever gone without sleep? Even after just one all-nighter, your mind feels foggy, your concentration disappears, and your body starts begging you to rest. But what would happen if you stayed awake not for one night, but for 11 entire days? In 1964, a 17-year-old American high school student decided to find out. His name was Randy Gardner. He stayed awake for 264 hours. That is, 11 days and approximately 24 minutes without normal sleep. As the experiment continued, his memory began to fail. His senses became distorted, and eventually, his ability to separate reality from imagination started to break down. This is the true story of one of the most famous sleep deprivation experiments in history. Before we begin, this experiment was extremely dangerous. Do not attempt anything like this yourself. In December 1963, Randy Gardner was an ordinary high school student living in San Diego, California. At the age of 17, Randy and his classmates were looking for a project to enter into a school science fair. Eventually, they came up with a simple but dangerous question. How long can a human being stay awake? At the time, a radio DJ in Hawaii had reportedly stayed awake for around 260 hours. Randy and his friends decided that they wanted to beat that record. What began as a high school science project quickly attracted attention. Local newspapers learned about the experiment, and soon the story began spreading. Eventually, a sleep researcher named Dr. William Dement became involved and helped observe Randy's condition. What had started as an experiment between teenagers became one of the most famous sleep deprivation cases ever documented. Throughout the experiment, Randy was never left alone. His friends and observers stayed beside him to make sure he did not fall asleep. Whenever he became drowsy, they talked to him. They took him for walks. They played basketball. They listened to music. They played games. Anything that could keep his mind active was used. Randy was not allowed to lie down because doing so would have made it much easier for him to fall asleep. He reportedly did not rely on powerful stimulant drugs. Instead, the group used conversation, physical activity, and constant supervision to keep him awake. However, there is one important complication. When the brain becomes severely sleep-deprived, it can enter extremely brief periods of sleep without the person realizing it. This is called a microsleep. A microsleep may last only a few seconds. A person may even appear to have their eyes open while parts of the brain temporarily enter a sleep-like state. Because of this, it is impossible to prove that Randy remained fully awake every single second of the 264 hours. Even so, the experiment remains one of the most closely observed cases of extreme sleep deprivation. During the first 24 hours, Randy did not appear to have any serious problems. He was tired, but he could still speak normally, move around, and take part in activities. Anyone who has stayed awake all night may recognize this stage. You feel exhausted, but you can still function. As more time passed, however, small changes began to appear. Randy had trouble concentrating. He started forgetting simple things. His reaction time became slower. He also became more emotional and more easily irritated. Sleep deprivation does not simply make us feel sleepy. It affects attention, decision-making, reaction time, and emotional control. Randy later said that he became increasingly irritable as the experiment continued. After approximately 3 days without sleep, the effects became much more serious. Randy's ability to think clearly began to deteriorate. His mood became unstable. He struggled to focus. He also began experiencing hallucinations and false perceptions. At one point, Randy reportedly believed that he was a famous American football player. He also mistook a street sign for a person. His brain was no longer processing visual information correctly. We often assume that we simply see the world exactly as it is. But in reality, the brain must interpret and organize everything our eyes detect. When the brain is severely sleep-deprived, this system becomes unreliable. Objects may be misidentified, shadows may appear to move, and things that do not exist may begin to feel completely real. By the fifth day, Randy's mental condition had become even more unstable. His memory had significantly worsened. He would forget what he had just been doing. He struggled to answer simple questions. During conversations, he sometimes forgot what he was talking about. His speech reportedly became less clear, and his ability to identify smells also declined. He also began showing signs of paranoia. At times, he felt as though people were watching him or trying to harm him. Extreme sleep deprivation can seriously damage judgment. The frightening part is that the person experiencing it may not fully understand how impaired they have become. Someone may believe they are still functioning normally, even when their thinking and reactions have already declined. That is one of the greatest dangers of sleep deprivation. The brain loses not only its ability to perform, but also its ability to accurately judge its own condition. However, Randy did not lose every ability. During the later stages of the experiment, Dr. William Dement reportedly played pinball against him. Surprisingly, Randy won. How could someone suffering from severe sleep deprivation still perform well at a game? The exact reason is unclear. However, activities that are highly familiar, exciting, or deeply practiced may temporarily increase alertness. A person may briefly perform well at something they enjoy, even while their overall mental condition is severely impaired. This does not mean that Randy was healthy or fully functional. His memory, judgment, attention, and emotional control were still seriously affected. A short burst of performance can hide the deeper effects of exhaustion. On January 8, 1964, Randy finally reached 264 hours without normal sleep. That was 11 days and approximately 24 minutes. He had broken the record he and his friends had been trying to surpass. On the final day, reporters surrounded him and repeatedly asked questions. But after 11 days without sleep, Randy had very little patience left. He became extremely irritated by journalists asking similar questions again and again. Randy later remembered reacting angrily because he was mentally and physically exhausted. After completing the experiment, he was taken to a hospital. Doctors examined him and monitored his brain activity. Finally, he was allowed to sleep. You might imagine that someone who had been awake for 11 days would sleep for 24 hours, maybe even 2 full days. But Randy's first recovery sleep lasted approximately 14 hours. After waking, he was still somewhat groggy, but after several nights of normal sleep, many of his abilities appeared to return. Randy Gardner's 264-hour experiment is often described as the longest time a person has ever stayed awake. However, that is not completely accurate. Other people later claimed or recorded longer periods of wakefulness. According to Guinness World Records, Robert McDonald stayed awake for 453 hours and 40 minutes in 1986. That is approximately 18 days and 21 hours. So why is Randy Gardner's experiment still more famous? One major reason is that his condition was closely observed by sleep researchers and medical professionals. The changes in his memory, mood, perception, and behavior were documented in much greater detail. Because of this, Randy's case became more than just a record. It became an important example of what extreme sleep deprivation can do to the human mind. Guinness World Records no longer accepts attempts to break this type of record because of the serious health risks involved. The lesson from this experiment is not that humans can safely survive for 11 days without sleep. The lesson is the opposite. Randy survived, and many of his abilities eventually recovered. But during the experiment, he experienced serious symptoms. His memory declined. His concentration disappeared. He experienced hallucinations. He became paranoid. His emotions became increasingly difficult to control. Later in life, Randy also said that he experienced a period of severe insomnia. However, it is not clear whether that insomnia was directly caused by the experiment. Sleep is not simply a period when the body does nothing. It is a time when the brain organizes information, strengthens memories, regulates emotions, and repairs important biological systems. Even one night without sleep can reduce attention and judgment. When sleep deprivation continues for several days, it can affect the way we understand reality itself. At the age of 17, Randy Gardner stayed awake for 264 hours. For approximately 11 days, he refused normal sleep as part of a high school science experiment. During that time, his memory failed. His concentration collapsed. He experienced hallucinations and paranoia. We often think that sleeping less gives us more time. But when we reduce sleep, the quality of our waking hours also begins to decline. Sleep is not wasted time. It is essential maintenance for the brain and body. It is what allows tomorrow's version of you to think clearly, react quickly, and function normally. What is the longest you have ever stayed awake? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories about psychology, sleep, and the human mind. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.